Well, happy Black Friday here, day after Thanksgiving, earlier in Seattle, but happy to get on for this here with our East Coast friend Ric Serritella here. Thank you so much for joining. Ric and I are going to do a live show. Don't know who's going to watch now or later, but this is our regularly scheduled time. Ric could come on, and I have a interview with Rod Pedersen coming up here in a little bit, talking CFL. Ric, did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Man, I'm getting over the food coma, Reed, and yeah, we're giving a little coast to coast coverage here. And kudos to you and your crew for the live coverage. 8.5 hours. You guys are beasts, man. And I was tuning in when I can, where I can. And you know what, man? I feel like the Markcast does the best alternate football show coverage out there. And I wanted to come on and chop it up and get into the nitty gritty here with some of these XFL squads.
Well, I appreciate. Yeah, Ric was gonna hop on the live stream, and then just so busy, and timing didn't work out. So we got Ric here. We're doing a deep dive into the rosters. I want to get Ric's thoughts on all that stuff because we had our big CFL coverage here. Wanted to had a lot of people like, hey, where is the deep dive and where is the recap? So we're gonna do that, and then like I said, we'll have CFL stuff on here. Please like and subscribe. We crossed it. I think we added like 100 subscribers through all the CFL stuff over the weekend. So I really appreciate that. Ric, overall thoughts on the XFL draft, talent level. Then I want to talk quarterbacks and then we'll deep dive. What did you think of how it all went down?
Yeah, I heard some of the commentary with your roundtable discussion during the live stream and how USFL, I guess I don't know if captive is the right word, but they're signed to contracts, which, made it somewhat limited. But I think overall, when you think about 600 players drafted, I mean, this is what spring football is for. A lot of players that are either coming off injury, really didn't have a place to showcase and develop. And I'll get into some of those developmental prospects that, you graduate college and a Chauncey Smith, who's so raw and athletic on the edge, needs to bulk up a little bit. A guy like Jack Snyder at San Jose State, maybe he's a guard, maybe he's a tackle. They just need developmental reps. And I think that's what I love about it. And so you see a little veterans that are a little bit longer in the tooth that want to continue playing. I think I saw somebody from the 2014 draft class. There was another team, we'll get into it, drafted Will Hill and Raheem Moore at the back end safety. So they're going to have a smart veteran back end of their defense. And so my guy Von Hutchins, who I worked with many years at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, I saw 3 receivers come off the board. Speed, speed, speed. It looks like they're emulating a Kansas City Chief product. And so we'll get into some of the head coaches, some of the GMs, a lot of the guys that I'm friendly with. And each team had a different approach. And I think that is what makes it so unique.
Well, I thought it's cool too. Now we finally are getting an identity of some of these teams, right? We had on Coach Ric talking kind of what do we think that some of these schemes might look like? What do we think some of these coaches want to do? But now, seeing some of the quarterbacks selected, seeing some of the top picks off the board, I think it's helpful now. We can say, okay, this is what the Sea Dragons are going to look like or whatever. In terms of the quarterbacks, that feels like a millennia ago now when they did the quarterback selection show. But any names you were surprised that you saw or didn't see?
I thought, you tell me, I thought Carson Strong was in this draft pool. And I thought that was kind of eye-raising that out of 15 quarterbacks drafted, Carson Strong was not one of them. So that was, I was kind of looking forward to see where he would go. I know Luis Perez and Jalen McClendon, I don't have which roster they are on in front of me, but I think that'll be an interesting quarterback competition. I know both of those guys really well. McClendon is a guy I've always been intrigued by his arm strength because he was stuck behind Jacoby Brissett at NC State. Then Ryan Finley came in, and he was somewhat heralded. I think he got drafted by the Bengals. Then he transferred to Baylor. It was kind of late in the game. He was stuck behind Charlie Brewer there, and by the time he did get snaps, it was kind of late in his senior year, so he never got a real opportunity. But, man, that kid's got a live arm. And Luis Perez, we all know, is a guy that's been bouncing around some of these alternate football leagues. And so that one stood out to me. I spoke to Coach Anthony Becht right after that quarterback draft, and he was so pumped up about having Ryan Willis. I really think, Ryan Willis to me reminds me of the modern day Tommy Maddox back in the old XFL, and he got picked up by the Pittsburgh Steelers after that. and kind of resurrected his career. Didn't quite pan out to be the John Elway successor in Denver. Went over to the XFL, I think he was the MVP, got picked up by the Steelers, and I could see Ryan Willis being that guy.
In terms of the big talking point we had on the live show was the defections, it feels like, from the USFL to the XFL, and Kyle Sloter, Luis Perez. We're seeing more of the players now, some of these guys that were signed. We even saw Case Cookus now, right? He got signed to the practice squad here of the Rams, I think yesterday, dealing with the Stafford stuff. Is that another quarterback that we have to kind of watch out for? Were you surprised that some of these guys said, hey, we want to take we kind of know what we have in the USFL, let's take a swing here?
I think at the end of the day, money talks. Let's be honest about it. And XFL is offering more money. Now, I give USFL lots of props and credit for finishing and completing a spring season from start to finish. And so, I think you feel better about that long-term play, where XFL, their TV contract is real. Like, XFL has real TV money coming in, where the USFL is kind of, the investors are the TV networks. So I think that's a big difference. We always talk about the survival of any spring league is going to be predicated on a television deal. Now, USFL is a little bit of a different dynamic, because I think, $250,000 they put up to fund that league last year. That's a drop in the bucket for reality sports programming. And I maybe you know better than I do, Reed. I saw, I think this morning or yesterday, there was a guy in the XFL draft, I think a running back, that just signed with the USFL. So I don't know how these contracts work. I've seen the contracts. I haven't had time to do a deep dive into them yet and have a complete understanding of them, but it is definitely an intriguing dynamic. And I also saw, like, the way the USFL schedule lines up. I thought they announced the start of their season in April. So the XFL will almost be like ending as the USFL ramps up, which I'm a big fan of, but I thought they were going to be competing during the same time of the year.
Yeah, so the XFL players have until December 26th to sign the contract, right? So they have it. I think Max said in one of our listeners, it's like a DocuSign. They're able to figure that out. So yeah, you will see some movement back and forth, which I do think is exciting, because here I'd wait through the. I don't think the USFL is saying no to anybody that took a couple weeks to decide, like, hey, I want to go to the XFL or not. So it'll be interesting that way. Yeah, April 15th, like, it's the same weekend there, the Memphis and all that kind of stuff. It does feel like anyone that gets cut from the XFL here, or even up through training camps and everything, could be picked up very easily by the USFL if there was someone they wanted. It feels like XFL gets kind of first dibs on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think, also you got to take into account they have an announced partnership with the NFL, and the whole Canton, campus with the program up in Ohio. If you don't get picked up by an NFL team, essentially The Rock came out and said, well, you have an open invite to play in the XFL. So there is somewhat of an NFL relationship there. I think the XFL is more glitz and glamour, quite frankly, and they're going to do reality TV programming, and Rock is going to tap into his, Hollywood connections there. But USFL, I think, is more for the nitty-gritty football fan so far, based on what I've seen.
Yeah, I've always said that XFL feels like the Matrix to me, of like, okay, we have 1,800 layers of this is kind of what we're doing. USFL is like caveman, like, here, football field, like, you enjoy, like, it does. And it's fine. I mean, they made it through the season. They had great ratings. I don't know. I've always said, is the inception of the XFL, is that too much? I don't know. We'll figure out here. So so we're going to do kind of, Rick's picked out, highlighted players from each of these rosters who we want to go through. I mean, I guess we'll start with the Renegades. Does that make sense? Arlington Renegades there.
Yeah.
Who stood out from you for that? We have Bob Stoops returning. I thought it was interesting. We're bringing back some of the highlighted specialists, and Taylor Russolino and Marquette King there. Those are exciting to see. But what did you make of the Arlington Renegade squad?
Yeah, and Rick Mueller is the director of pro personnel there, so you get an NFL experienced kind of decision maker, which is always interesting. Marquette King, I think, is good for the brand when you talk about XFL entertainment. He's a personality. They are the team actually that have Will Hill and Raheem Moore as their safety. So Will Hill out of Florida, Raheem Moore out of UCLA. More on that Broncos Super Bowl team, I believe. And Hill was just a guy. He's a Jersey guy. Always had his nose in a little bit of trouble, but he loved the game. And that was clear when he played with the Giants. He could play nickel. He could play safety. He could play in the box, a little bit undersized, but his heart and toughness outweigh the lack of size. So the secondary, Devontae Busby has NFL experience, sticking on defense, man. Isaiah Graham Mobley, this is one of my personal favorites from, I think it was in this year's draft class, but Loco Ocho, they used to call him during his Temple days. Then he finished up at Boston College. This guy is a special teams extraordinaire, dynamo. Every NFL team that's looking for a gunner and a special team extraordinaire guy should be looking at Isaiah Graham Mobley. Bruce Hector out of the UCF or South Florida School, defensive tackle. I know he was with the Chiefs and the Eagles. Again, he just needs to get his weight up a little. Came out at like 285. We actually had him at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. And so I think he's a guy that'll eventually be picked up. Offensive linemen and defensive linemen, a lot of these guys, like a Bruce Hector, just needs to be developed. He needs to pack on 10, 15 muscles, stay on that pro regimen, strength and conditioning program. That's why I love these leagues. Now, offensively, Sal Cannella, this guy has made a name for himself in the XFL and Alliance League and some of these alternate leagues. And, he was a little bit of a knucklehead coming out of school. And so, he's finding himself out here trying, but he's matured, right? And so now he's performing at a high level. All he does is make plays. He's a dependable pass catcher, and Sal Cannella just continues. Part of the problem, Reed, is like, scouts get fixated on the last image or the last thing that they've heard or seen from a player. And I think, now that we have 2 spring leagues, they can see guys more consistently and like, he did it in the USFL. Now he's doing it in the XFL. Hey, like maybe we should bring him in. Okay, he was a little immature coming out, but dude's been still bouncing around 4 or 5 years. Obviously, he loves the game. Ja'Cory Sullivan is just an athletic freak. I think he's a UCF guy. Brandon Arracondo from Washington, I believe, a solid route runner. And then Kyle Sloter, who you mentioned, and somebody, again, like he's developed more since he's departed college, than I saw him develop in college. And Steve Fairchild, who's a good friend and trains a lot of the Minnesota-based quarterbacks or out there, Colorado, I think he's based. He told me about Sloter coming out. I've always kept tabs on him. I think he ran into a little bit of an injury down there at the USFL last year. But in terms of being a capable backup quarterback at the NFL level, Kyle Sloter is capable. And I said the same thing. You were out at the CFL championship. We had McLeod Bethel Thompson out at one of the hub camps, and immediately he signed with Toronto like a week after the camp. I said, McLeod, who he was quick to correct me. I had him on the show. I said, you clearly can play at the NFL level. Why did you choose to sign with the CFL team? But he enjoyed being the guy, being the starter, the camaraderie, and the team. I get the same sense from a Kyle Sloter, and this guy is going to have the opportunity to continue playing as long as he's healthy. Kyle Sloter ain't going nowhere, and I'm here for it.
Well, it's interesting, even in watching McLeod, starting quarterback, win the Grey Cup. It was so cool seeing him. Like he was in the spring league back when CFL had the offseason. But even his backup, Chad Kelly, here's someone that Chad had the opportunity to do USFL, kind of whatever he wanted, decided to go up, play number 2 in Toronto, ended up winning the game. And now, he is going to be a very valuable name in the CFL here moving forward after he gets off his rookie contract. So it's interesting, parlaying some of these leagues back and forth, but absolutely Kyle Sloter. We had a comment from listener Max saying that, Sloter back with Cannella. That is, even with the Breakers in the USFL, it's good to see some of these pairings kind of make their show up here in the XFL as well. Some of these guys that are familiar with each other.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things, not to bounce too much around, but like that's one of the things I try to express to the fan-controlled football league is keeping those characters, those storylines, those players developed. And I think they had too much turnover in that second season. And back to your CFL point, my understanding is whether it's written into the contract or not, CFL has had to become a little bit more flexible with their contract rules, and in an effort to not lose too many guys to the XFL and CFL. So you are seeing guys consider the CFL, which I still think is number two in terms of overall talent, competitiveness, pay, stability. CFL is still number two, but here in the States, man, we love the XFL, we love the USFL, we just love football.
Yeah. So anyway, Renegade's good. Bob Soup's back. I think that helps. He went through it last year, able to kind of, or whatever it was, but knows that pace because it is a different pace. I think getting some of these coaches, I think USFL dealt with that as well, right? Some of the we got to get a whole team together here in a couple months and do all that. Anything else with the Renegades before we move on? I got Defenders next year on the list.
No, I think it's a good blend overall. This is a team that really has, I think, mostly veteran guys. If you look at NFL experience, I think that's the direction and angle that they went. And, Bruce Hector even is a 2 or 3 year developmental guy. Isaiah Graham Mobley, I mentioned, is the last year or two. But for the most part, a lot of these guys have NFL experience. And we mentioned Rick Mueller, the DPP there. No coincidence. And so, I think it's a great gig for Stoops. And, overall, I'd say off the cuff, solid 7,
7 out of 10.
Sure.
Jen is a Renegades fan. She says Renegades going all the way here. Max has a question before we move on. How do you feel about the Renegades basically just having the offensive and defensive system from the 2020 Battlehawks?
Well, a lot remains to be seen. Hopefully coaches adapt and adjust, and I think we'll see a little bit of variety.
It's good though. It's if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and move on for that. All right, DC Defenders, Eric Dungy. Then we had Derek King. I presume will be picked up here whenever they decide to do that transaction. Was going to be the other quarterback. Got signed to the Panthers. I think made like $11,500 to kind of fill in there for that week, simulating whatever in practice for that. But we have Eric Dungy, presumably Derek King here. Everything else with the Defenders. What did you make of their roster?
Man, this has got my guy Von Hutchins' fingerprints all over it. And Von is just such a well-respected talent evaluator, of course, doing it with the Indianapolis Colts and the Raiders as a player and a scout. Spent 3 or 4 years working with us at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, and it's good to see some of our alumni pop up on the roster. But yeah, again, now you could tell Von, he's been in the college scouting side of things, right? We talked about Rick Mueller being an NFL, more of an NFL guy, seeking those kind of experienced players. Look at Von, man. He's got all young studs that are overlooked in recent years drafts. And, you mentioned Eric Dungy, which, I'm not a huge fan of. I get it. I understand it. And I think he's good for the league. I don't think he's a guy that's going to use this as a springboard and go on to the next level. But I think he could be a capable, competent quarterback. And you mentioned Derek King. It's good to see him still get an opportunity to play quarterback. Really, that's what the beauty of these leagues are now. I'll go into the running backs. Abram Smith. Reed, I don't know about you, but I like a running back who started off as a linebacker. That's my kind of party. And you saw that at Baylor, man. He's just tough. He's hard-nosed. He's got size. He's physical. Pretty good speed. I'm surprised, quite frankly, that he was available. And we talk about running back. There's just so many good players. I would say there's such a fine line. If there's one position where I've seen NFL talent players not make it, it's at running back, just because there are so many. And Puka Williams is another guy coming out of Kansas. He split time there with Khalil Herbert early on. I think, he was one of those guys that had that quirky scouting report in our notes. He was born with 6 toes, I believe. And, you remember these weird, quirky things. Raquel Armstead, man, I'm glad to see him pop up there. I don't know what his health status is. I heard he almost died from the vaccine or COVID. I mean, I really heard he was bad. And so hopefully this is a sign that he's bounced back and recovered. And Temple tough guy. He's bounced around. He was with the Eagles most recently. I know he started off with the Jaguars. Just hasn't been able to stick and latch on, but he's a tough, hard-nosed guy. And then, they're wide receivers like Jaquez Ezzard. If you watch the FCS playoffs 2 years ago, I think it was, I mean, he put Sam Houston State on his back, carried them into the playoffs. We had him at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, and I felt like he was a poor man's Deebo Samuel, where you see like what Devin Duvernay is doing in Baltimore, lining up in the backfield, kind of emulating that Deebo Samuel role. Every team, it's a trendy type of league, and everybody's looking for that guy. Jaquez Ezzard is that guy, and he can return kicks. He can line up inside, outside. He's got blazing speed, as does KD Cannon, who's somewhat of a one-trick pony. But then when you start putting Ezzard and KD Cannon and then Jazz Ferguson, I think at a UNC, all on the field together, you just run seams, stretch the field, let Eric Dungy or De'Aaron King air it out and play pitch and catch with these guys. But I think that's what they're hoping to do here, is just put a lot of speed on the field. And defensively, like, Vaughn, I know he graduated from Ole Miss, so I see his hottie toddy guy, Fidel Brown, defensive tackle with some NFL experience. I'm sure he'll get every opportunity to stick and make an impact. Jacob Panasiuk, the defensive end out of Michigan State, who I had a chance to scout personally, I think, he's a guy, again, a developmental prospect who could come in and get a practice squad opportunity and work his way up and become a valuable backup at the next level. He just needs reps. And Parnell Motley is maybe one of those guys too, where he just plays an aggressive style of corner and needs more in-game experience. So I think Reggie Barlow is a guy that I love what he did here, because I think, again, Von Hutchins' fingerprints are all over this. I think Reggie Barlow is going to coach. I think Von is going to be the evaluator and decision maker. And, I know Vaughn is all gas, no brakes. So for me, in terms of in-season maneuvering and transactions between now and the start of the season, I would imagine DC Defenders are going to be a very active team, because Vaughn's a very active guy working the phone lines.
That's good, though. Let's add a little bit more of that. What did you think of Abram Smith, number one running back? We took, number one pick in the draft here. We had even debates in our show, like, do you start with that? It's spring football. We got to hit the ground game running because the offense is a little. So what did you make of that take? And a lot of running backs went early, but especially number one.
Yeah, I didn't put too much emphasis on where and when players were picked. I think, a guy like Abram Smith, he may have went earlier just because he's one of the more recent draft classes, and some of the, we'll get into some of the other decision makers that probably looked like they didn't do any homework. So I think there was a little bit of like, hey, let's grab Abram Smith because a lot of people know about him. Let's make sure we get him type of thing. But, they did it in a weird way where, like, they drafted all the quarterbacks first, and then they did the skill positions. And it looks like, I wasn't able to keep up with everything. It looks like they lumped defensive players together. Then they kind of just did rounds where they selected only special teams. So I didn't personally put too much weight or emphasis on it. I think when we get to XFL training camp, where these guys were drafted really won't make much of an impact or difference.
He says, this doesn't. Were you surprised to see the return of Summit?
No.
I that doesn't mean anything to me. So does that mean something to you?
No.
Okay. All right. I have no idea. Moving on, Houston Roughnecks here. Ellaby. This was exciting too when we had the quarterback selection show. Seeing like Brandon Silvers come out. Some of these guys are very excited. That's my quarterback here. I have a signed Brandon Silvers shirt. You can see mine here with the
quarterback, man.
Yeah, that's my quarterback. What did you make here? Wade Phillips, everything else going on. What did you make of the Roughnecks?
Yeah, Mark Lillibridge there, former director of personnel for the Packers, now with the Houston Roughnecks. He was based in St. Louis. I know Mark, and I know he's run a lot of camps for free agents, so he's got his finger on the pulse. In terms of Silvers and Ellaby, Ellaby, I think he was an underclassman, if I'm not mistaken. Got some bad advice. Regardless, has all the traits, all the tools in the toolbox, like they say. Very raw, unpolished, needs to hone in his mechanics, become a more consistent passer. But when you talk about the athleticism, ability to bide time in the pocket, extend plays, throw on the run, Ellaby can do that, but he's going to have to wait his time. I think Brandon Silvers is the guy that really, I like what he does with the RPO. He's in terms of the XFL quarterbacks chosen, I think he'll be more one of the better decision makers. And he's a stare the ship kind of guy. We've seen him have his outbursts at times, but I think in terms of being an efficient game manager, smart decision maker, Brandon Silvers can do all that. And so it'll be interesting to see. I think Silvers starts there, and we'll see how it wears on. LB will probably get a chance to showcase some of that talent at some point. Max Borgi from Washington. Or Washington State, Mike Leach's team up there. He was an impressive pass catcher early on in his career. Now, we had him at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, and he was banged up. He was kind of injured during that whole draft process coming out. And I think that was a year ago or 2 years ago. And again, we talked about running back is so deep. If you don't have a good, clean draft circuit, now he wasn't a combine guy. And so I think he ran injured, had a poor pro day, and you get kind of lost in the shuffle. So here's a great opportunity now for Borgi, and you see a lot of teams employing the specialist role. A lot of teams use committee like 3 running backs now, where they have a pass catching specialist, and I think Borgi has an opportunity to kind of establish himself here in that role. Offensive linemen, there's really not enough developmental offensive lineman, but Sam Cooper out of Merrimack, man, this guy has got one of the better backstories, I think, of any player in the league. He's so tough and hard-nosed on the field. He's a big panda bear off the field. Lacks height and length, but I think center is his best position. I hope that's where they play him. I do believe he could be a valuable swingman at the next level, center, guard, whatever the case may be. And I know he's had his cup of tea with a couple teams up there. So I'm a big fan of Sam Cooper. Jack Snyder, somebody I had a chance to see when I went and made my trip to San Jose. I don't like him at tackle. I do think he has a future at guard. And so if he just kind of refines some of his technique and converts himself into a true guard, which I think he might already be in the process of doing, I think he could stick around and maybe get a look at the next level. Chauncey Rivers is a guy that again, has all the traits and the tools and the size and the athleticism, just really hasn't clicked and put it all together. And I'll lump John Dacca out of James Madison in that category, who I love Dacca. When I went and saw him at James Madison, that was back when DiNucci was there. But, Dacca made so many plays, and he's awesome on the blocked kicks. Like, this guy had like 8 blocked kicks at James Madison. Now, he was playing defensive end. He was like 225 pounds, which, as you know, isn't going to cut it. So I think he needs to convert and be a stand-up linebacker. But again, special teams, like I mentioned Isaiah Graham-Mobley, I like John Dacca, if for nothing else more. This guy's a special team stud. And then Tavante Beckett, man, I was talking to somebody in the league that had called and was like, oh, what do you think of Beckett, man? And I gave my whole spiel. Oh, he can play safety. He can play linebacker, defensive player of the year, tackle machine, nose for the football. And I went on my whole spiel. And, yeah, I agree, Rick, but, man, he's just short. And, he's like Sam Mills short. He's like 5'9". But, I think if he wants to have a shot at the NFL, he's probably got to play like that strong safety in the box role. But you talk about an exciting, productive, collegiate player, man. Tavante Beckett is going to be one of my personal favorites because he's just going to make plays. You're not going to be able to take him off the field. He's going to be roaming sideline to sideline, playing with his hair on fire. So he's going to be one of the more decorated players, I believe. If you want just straight production, Beckett will give it to you. And then Diago Fago, I don't know, whatever, he floats your boat, from Navy. He was a guy who I believe was on the radar for the NFLPA Bowl. I think he wound up taking an East-West Shrine Bowl invite, and I had a chance to see him on the All-Star circuit. I thought he played very well. I thought he was heady. I thought he was smart. I thought he had good size. I don't know what happened at the NFL. I'm sure he got a shot, but I think this is a guy that has every opportunity to find himself back into the league. And then Brandon Easterling, a big, long, athletic safety that was really overlooked. For some odd reason, I think out of Davidson, I couldn't find a lot of love for him in the scouting community, but every time I put on his film, he flashed and he just seemed to make plays. And I thought he had a tremendous size, athleticism combination. So I'm going to be looking out for Brandon Easterling. But overall, Wade Phillips is somebody who was our assistant coach last year at the PA Bowl. So I had a chance to spend a good amount of time with Coach Phillips, and he loves the game. He wants to continue coaching the game, and they got themselves maybe the best head coach there, I think, maybe of the XFL.
Interesting. You're that high on Phillips. That's good.
Well, I think, this guy's forgotten more football than we'll ever know. And when you're able to have a defense in a spring league, the defense is always going to be ahead of the offense coming out of the gates. Then the offense has to catch up. So if the Houston Roughnecks can come out and play that Wade Phillips defense, I think they're going to have every opportunity to go all the way.
In terms of last comment here, you're talking a lot about the offensive line, and we had on there Galco, and there lots of conversations ahead of the season, and USFL needing O-line and XFL, and is there enough? Curious, I think a lot of the teams kind of saved a lot of their picks that were in the offensive line rounds, right? Presumably. I think that the feedback was if these guys are available now, they'll be available in January when we do the supplemental one. But did you think just in terms of offensive line in general, there's enough guys here to fill out some of these rosters, or is this concerning?
No, I mean, listen, it's the one position on the planet Earth. There's just not enough gargantuan 6'5", 300+ pound athletic people to play offensive line. There's not enough of these guys in the NFL, right? And look at the NFL. I would imagine every NFL team, not just backups, but there's a lot of NFL teams looking to upgrade their starters. And it's a combination of there's just not enough of these guys, but also when you talk about now at least 10 years of this influx of spread RPO college offensive schemes coming into the NFL, and NFL offense is being dumbed down, and it trickles out to certain positions like wide receivers. It impacted at first, and I think now we've adapted and adjusted, but wide receiver was a hard evaluation in some of these simplistic offenses. Now what you're seeing is a lot of up-tempo players looking over to the side, reading a flashcard. A lot of times offensive linemen aren't even getting down into a stance. And so there's a lot of work to be done with these guys. And look at the centers. I mean, you got centers that come to the pros. They never did a snap under center. They never had a quarterback take a snap under center. So now you got to teach a center how to do a basic snap. I mean, these are things that we've never had to think about or imagine or try in the past, but it's just a byproduct of simplified offenses, not enough player development at the collegiate level. And so when these guys get to the NFL, they get weeded out real quickly. And you see guys like Jason Peters, they got to beg them out of retirement because they just can't find enough of them. So I agree. Long rant there, but working with the Hub football guys, I can tell you, Reed, like, hey, we don't just take guys just to take guys. If we feel like we can find a talented player that can continue his pro career, we take them. But I can tell you, offensive line is the scarcest, other than quarterbacks, because if you're a good quarterback, you're somewhere. But offensive line, man, it's the most scarcest position, not just for the spring league, for the NFL. So, of course, that's going to trickle down, and CFL has their own issues as well.
Moving on here, the Guardians. I've heard so far people are kind of down on this quarterback room. Mitch Kidd was added late, but then we had DeAndre Francois, Quentin Dormady there. Francois, that he famous, for FCF, right? That was kind of where he got a lot of his looks. Thoughts here for Orlando?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Let me just say, Quentin Dormady, I hate to put it this way, he just can't play football. I mean, that's just a bad pick. I don't think, he's a guy that's going to last very long, even in the XFL. That's just my personal opinion. Who is the other quarterback that you mentioned?
DeAndre Francois.
Yeah, Francois, I'm a fan of. And, here's a guy I've been around a lot over the last 3 years. And really, most of us know him from his days at Florida State because he was this big 4 or 5-star heralded recruit. He was involved in some funky stuff off the field. And so he went down to Hampton, I believe, and finished his career off there. Didn't quite have, statistically speaking, threw a lot of interceptions for my liking, but I was expecting to be like, I heard that he was an immature guy. And so, like, I've been around him. I was around him at ANC combines. I was around him at the fan controlled football league. I was around him at multiple hub football camps. And like every time I saw him, he was better. His mechanics improved. Like, he's a real polished pocket passer. His accuracy, like, people say you can't improve your consistency. Like, I say, go look at Jalen Hurts and go look at DeAndre Francois. But again, like, he does it in the FCF, which to me, go use the Kurt Warner analogy. He'll tell you it's harder to play the indoor game with the short, intermediate passes, quick decision-making game. DeAndre Francois did that effectively at the FCF. Then he went and played somewhere else. And I think DeAndre Francois is going to surprise a lot of people here. And I like the kid. And I went in there with a misconception about him. And every time I saw him, I said, man, he looks better than the last. He looks better than the last. And I've seen him at least at 4 or 5 different free agent workouts. So I can follow up, though. Larry Lee, I wasn't too familiar with. The director of personnel, Terrell Buckley, obviously. I remember him coming out of Syracuse. So after the quarterbacks, Jermaine Martin, which I was a little bit disappointed. It didn't sound like your compadres were too familiar with him coming out NCA&T. I had a chance to look at him at the HBCU Bowl. Kind of lacked the explosiveness in person. Like, when I saw him on film and when I saw him in person, the explosiveness didn't match. So I'll be looking close at Jermaine Martin. He's an intriguing guy. Charleston Rambo is an intriguing guy from Oklahoma, finished up at the U. I think he ran into some injuries maybe along the way. So, we'll see what happens. But Stephen Guidry's another good-looking wide receiver that they got there, another size, speed guy. But to me, one of the best picks. And again, that's why you can't put any emphasis or weight on where these guys were chosen. But man, Andrew Jamil, this guy is unguardable. He is the definition of being able to create separation in short area space. Andrew Jamil, you can't stick this kid. And he might be 5'7", 5'8". He's a white slot wide receiver, so I think he gets miscast or Markcast a lot of times. But Jamil, I think he's going to have a shot, at least maybe in the MVP running, if you want your hot take. Andrew Jamil is going to be one of the elite players in the XFL. You can take that to the bank. And then Cody Latimer, I mentioned, hey, I saw a guy from the 2014 draft out of Indiana, Denver Broncos, Cody Latimer. I mean, that's so cool to see. And I think he might be another guy that ran into injuries. But when you see a guy, obviously, he doesn't need to be doing this. He loves the game, and he wants to keep on playing. And so I get excited when I see stuff like that. You mentioned offensive lineman, Brandon Murphy. I apologize ahead of time. He probably is not going to like what I say here, but he needs to hear this. And Brandon Murphy was a guy I found on a hub film, and I don't think he even played college ball, Reed. And he sent in his film. He's playing out yard in the backyard and really like amateur film. But I saw a guy here. I was like, man, this guy's a lump of clay. And so we brought him out to the hub, and Eugene Chung fell in love with him. He's like, man, this guy can play now. And I think I think he has some basketball background to his game. And so like Eugene Chung took him under his wing. I probably shouldn't even share this story, but it's true. Brought him into his home, worked with this kid for months. And like, the kid started getting Hollywood, and he was getting some NFL workouts, and it was starting to get to his head, and he stopped working as hard, and he stopped doing like all these things that Coach Chung was working with him on. And so like, I hope he gets his head on straight, because in terms of like potential, I think sky's the limit for Brandon Murphy. He's good enough to be playing in the NFL. He's got to get it screwed on right. And, I hope he does. But Nick Coe from Mississippi, I want to say, he was drafted by the Lions, I believe. Nick Coe at one time was very highly thought of. So on the defensive side there, to wrap up with the Orlando Guardians, Matt Elam was another guy that came out to the hub. We get a veteran guys like Brandon Marshall, the linebacker, was out there, I think, with Matt Elam. And, Elam still flashed that he could do it occasionally. Like, I don't know if he's still got the pep in his step to make an NFL roster at the safety position. Like, he might be good for 5 to 15 snaps at the NFL level. But I'll tell you what, man, what I really appreciated about Matt Elam and his time at the Hub football camp is this is a guy that passes it forward. And you could see, like, the younger players knew who he was. They wanted to pick his brain. And, like, he had no ego, man. He was I think he actually embraced the role. And because he was another one of these guys coming out of Florida characterized as immature, and I think he got into some trouble as well. Elam is his brother, who also played in the NFL and an agent. So Matt Elam, I think, is going to make his mark in the XFL. I think he'll be a good player for the league, and I think he'll be a good player for the younger players that play alongside him. One last guy, Tommy Alger, the long snapper. We had him out at the hub. He was there as a tight end. So I like this pick because here's a guy. Yeah, he'll be your long snapper, and that's cool that he's going to try to make it as a long snapper. But he also plays tight end. And so I kind of like that dynamic, and we'll see what Tommy Alger. I think he might even have played in the FCF a little bit, but he's a guy that, again, the passion of the game, the love for football, it oozes through his pores. So you can't help but to root for guys like that.
No, so yeah, he was in the chat during the live stream. We were like, "Oh, Tommy, like we got to get drafted," and he knew a lot of the guys. Yeah, and then like you pointed out correctly, yeah, getting drafted as a long snapper, but playing the tight end position there. So it's like kind of, and we noticed that a lot during the draft. That some of these guys were drafted maybe out of position and have dual purpose for some of these guys if they're able to do it.
Well, you know what, Tommy, go look up the kid out of Duquesne, Christian Kuntz. Out of Duquesne, all NEC performer, came out, tried to make it as a linebacker, got cut and signed. I can't tell you how many times. Reinvented himself as a long snapper. And like now I think he finally stuck with the Steelers, but it took him like 6 or 7 years to transform himself and actually stick and make an NFL roster. And now they can't get rid of the guy. So that look no further. Christian Kuntz, man, great story.
Going here to the Brahmas, Coach Hines Ward here, right? I think a lot of people are excited for that, like, exciting branding, everything else behind that. Thoughts on that? They brought in Reed Sinnett here and Jack Cohn coming in, and then Juwan Pass, Anthony Russo. A lot of different picture. What made you stand out from the Brahmas?
Okay, you mentioned the quarterback there. I didn't have on my list. Who did they sign?
They brought in Jack Cohn and Reed Sinnett here, and kind of that post supplemental kind of, hey, we're adding on people here at the end.
Okay, yeah, because I was gonna say, like, my initial reaction was like Will Lewis and Hines Ward here. They maybe didn't do any homework, but Anthony Russo is a guy. He started as a freshman at Temple. That was arguably his best season. He went on to Michigan State, and he's just not. He's not a guy for me, and I want him to be a guy. And I love Russo, and he's a Northeast Paisan and a good dude. But I don't see NFL in his future. Juwan Pass, this is a guy who came out very highly touted. Started his career off at Louisville. Actually, early on, he had enjoyed a little bit of success there, and then he was one of these quarterbacks down at the HBCU Bowl, and man. I was talking to a lot of the scouts down there, and I'm just like, man, what happened to Pass? What happened? Like, how did he fall from grace so far at Louisville? And like, when I tell you, Reed, like, he wasn't even one of the top 5 quarterbacks at the HBCU, and none of those quarterbacks made it out of that game. Well, actually, yeah, not even the kid we had at the NFLPA Bowl from A&M, Akil Glass, right? He didn't even make it. And so, like, when I said Juwan Pass is getting drafted in the XFL, I'm like, he wasn't even one of the top 5 guys at the HBCU Bowl. I'm like, what are they doing, Pass and Russo? So Jack Cohn and whoever else you mentioned will probably be the two quarterbacks. So we just wasted 5 minutes of this podcast that we'll never have back. And it might be the highlight of Jawan Pass and Anthony Russo XFL career. But Jaquez Patrick, the running back out of Florida State, I thought he flashed some great potential when I saw him at the East West Shrine, ran hard, just I guess was product of the numbers. I'll tell you what, San Antonio might have the best backfield. Kalen Balaj, you talk about a pass catcher, he could kind of play that role. And then one of my favorite picks of the whole entire draft, Calvin Turner. If you love football and you're up at 2-3 in the morning and there's nothing else on and you watch a lot of Hawaii football, then you're familiar with Calvin Turner. He's returned kicks as a punt returner. He's returned kicks as a kick returner. And it's interesting to see him lined up here as a running back. And I did cartwheels and pounded the table trying to get him into the NFL PA Bowl game. Didn't work out. I think he did go to the Hula Bowl. And the biggest critique was his size. So the fact that it looks like he's converting from wide receiver to running back at 5'8", 5'9", that might be the best play. But I think they've got a pretty interesting three-headed monster with Patrick, Turner, Balaj. That's going to be interesting. Then you add two big tree trunk receivers, TJ Vasher, and then at wideout, and then Dylan Parham at tight end, who, man, he made some good plays for the Chargers down the stretch of the season. I'm surprised they didn't bring him back. I think Vasher and Parham, you do a little ground and pound to get into the red zone and you throw some alley-oops to those guys. Could be a good recipe there. Luke Jurga, I think, is a guy that just, lacks the size to play at the NFL, but I think he'll be one of the better offensive linemen in the XFL. Mike Tieverdoff is a guy out of Rutgers that, is just a lunch bucket guy. And he had a hell of a pro day, man. He was so far under the radar. I think he's going to do very well in this league. I think he's going to surprise some people. I think he'll be amongst the league leaders in sacks, Mike Tieverdoff. This is a guy that I can tell you scouts overlooked him. He's going to turn some heads in this league. Mike Tieverdoff, remember that name. He's very well coached on the fundamentals. He's not going to wow you from first appearance. But, man, once you start peeling back the layers of that onion, Mike Tieverdoff can play now. I think he's this year's draft class, so keep a lookout for him. Carrie Vincent Jr., it seems like yesterday he was just in Eagles camp out of LSU, and then he's had a couple stints with different NFL teams. And then safety Bubba Bolden is just a guy I've always liked. I know Ed Reed has been around the Miami program and has kind of been his protege down there at the U the last couple of years. So that's what the XFL is about, taking guys like Bubba Bolden and developing the talent and potential that resides inside. So that's your San Antonio Brahmas.
That's good. That's good. Coach Ward there, people making sure you didn't, curious kind of what that would look like here coming in and getting the reins. Curious to know your thoughts here. My, I guess now Sea Dragons, I guess we're going with that. I'll always write it as a parentheses, the Seattle Sea Dragons here. But Ben DiNucci, that was someone that at least popped a lot, in terms of, hey, this is someone we know, right? Obviously, Steven Montez in there. They added Brian Lewerke as well, who I think was a spring leaguer guy. I can't remember if the Blues or one of those teams. We had Brian Lewerke. What did you make of that? And Jim Haslett and June Jones and Randy Mueller and everybody else up in Seattle?
Yeah, Randy Mueller, good friend. So, yeah, Lewerke was with the Giants too recently. So, not an NFL guy. He's got a great agent, Mike McCarthy, but not an NFL guy in my opinion. But I think somebody who's going to come in and compete. Like Steven Montez at Colorado, I had a chance to scout him in person. Obviously, I think starting as a true freshman and having a rocket launcher arm got a lot of people's attention. But, again, just a guy, if you ever watch some of his interviews, especially early on at Colorado, he's just like, dude, like, what are you talking about? Little bit of a quirky personality, maybe along the lines of a Will Levis, but never really panned out. Never really, I felt like watching Steven Montez at Colorado was just a plateau. He never kind of ascended to where we thought he would be. Ben DiNucci, he played, I thought, well in spurts for the Cowboys a couple years ago. I didn't really see him as an NFL guy when I went down to James Madison now the coach has kind of poisoned my mind a little bit. They just said this guy is so Hollywood. He's so full of himself. He's so conceited. He rubs teammates the wrong way. And so, like, I didn't view him as a big time prospect. And that before you know it, he's making plays for the Cowboys. And I thought he flashed enough potential where he at least deserves another look. So I think Ben DiNucci will be the guy. Jawan Green, somebody from Albany that I've always had an affinity for, and he's a nice deep ball threat. We had him out at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl a few years back. He was catching passes from Jeff Undercuffler, who's buried over there on Coach Moorhead's team in Akron now. But Undercuffler to Jawan Green, man, I watched the game in Monmouth where these guys went into like triple overtime, 54-52. Jawan Green caught like 3 or 4 touchdowns. He probably dropped like another 2 or 3 in that game. And that's really, I mean, if I'm being honest, like he dropped some passes throughout the week at the NFLPA Bowl that I thought kind of hurt his stock as well. So like Jawan Green to me is a guy, if he can just cure some of those dropsies, he's an NFL guy all day. The next guy I get excited about, man, Julian Davenport, who I believe came out of Bucknell. I called him the Condor. This is one of the biggest wingspans I've ever seen in my life. And I don't have it all in front of me. I know it's 80-something inches, but this guy's wingspan is like 8 feet. And he actually started some games, I believe, for the Texans. And so I don't know if he got hurt or what happened. But again, that's what we find out about guys like Julian Davenport in the XFL. I'm excited to see what he brings, because I would imagine he's going to be the starting left tackle there. And then Paul Gratton is somebody who started off at Villanova, smart as hell, was all CAA, transferred over to UCLA, finished his career there. Maybe not the prototypical size. Center, obviously, being a hard position to make it at, especially when you come from the FCS. And yeah, he played his last year at UCLA, but West Coast kind of flying under the radar. How about PJ Hall flipping a defense? This was like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. We all know, I think the Raiders took him, which was no surprise because he had all kinds of off the field baggage. And so, but he was always an electrifying guy, could bring some pass rush from the interior, move up and down the defensive line. And obviously his heart is still into it. So I hope that the light switch flips on, and that's a guy that can just straight up kick some ass in this league. Nick Lalos is a guy who could kick some ass in a street fight because he's a jiu-jitsu and black belt, and he's out of Dartmouth. I know he spent a little bit of time with the Giants, and he's a good football player without a true position. Like, he's kind of too small for defensive tackle, not big enough for defensive end, probably too slow to play linebacker. So like, they're going to have to get creative with him. He's a good football player, but where do you play him, I think, is the question with Nick Lalos. But obviously another guy with a Dartmouth degree that doesn't need to be doing this. He obviously loves the game, all Ivy League performer. And then Tizar Skipper, like, if you're looking for the Paul Orndorff of this league, like, Tizar Skipper is it, man. This guy's so chiseled. He was training in New Jersey, I think, coming out. I forget where he came from, maybe Maryland. I could be wrong there. But, dude, like, I remember the first day I interviewed Tizar Skipper, when we got done with the interview, and I like patted him on the back of the arm. I was like, yo, dude, you rocked up, huh? He's like, oh, you know it, bro. Guns out, sun's out. He start flexing, and like, this guy is so ripped. And then he tested really well. So he again, I think he had some injuries because he was doing really well with the Steelers at one point, Tizar Skipper. And I think this is a guy, he comes into the XFL, proves his worth. He's going to get the call up to at least a practice squad, I would imagine. Kareem Orr at cornerback is a guy with NFL experience that I wanted to highlight. I kind of liked him coming out. And then Rogest Faris, the Hawaii cornerback, who we had at the NFLPA Bowl and made a handful of interceptions throughout the week, had himself a good NFLPA Bowl game. I think he was with the Falcons last time I was able to keep up with him. Again, somebody that has a great agent in Evan Brennan, so I expect him to be working the phone lines and pointing out to the NFL teams about how well Rogest Faris does in the XFL, and I believe he can return kicks as well, so that bodes well for his NFL potential.
Out of 10 for the Sea Dragons, how did Coach Haslett do?
Oh yeah, we forgot about those
Yeah, that
numbers.
we got.
Well, I'll give the Sea Dragons, looking at it right now, I'm going to give them a solid 8. Yeah.
Okay. I just want the top and bottom at the end. I think we'll salvage it by the worst and worst and first, because I think I called this winners and losers of the draft. So we really should at least we'll name it a winner and the loser. Your friend, you said you talked to him here, Coach Becht over in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Will be probably one of the franchise teams, right? Whether we want to be or not with the Kaka and all that. Ryan Willis, you talked about before, AJ McCarron there. They brought in Nick Tiano as well recently with the quarterback, an additional one on that. So you said good on that. Any other thoughts there from the Battlehawks?
Yeah, Nick Tiano. In fact, I remember a couple years ago, Vaughn Hutchins was sitting next to me, and we were getting ready for kickoff. He goes, "All right, Rick, who you got? Who's the MVP going to be?" I looked at him. I said, "Man, based on what I've seen all week, there's only one guy, Nick Tiano. This guy throws a beautiful deep ball. He's a gunslinger. He's got plenty of confidence, maybe borderline too much confidence, but that's interesting because, I mean, I just don't see room for him. And that's just Anthony Becht and Dave Bowler identifying a quality arm and injecting him into the mix. Because I did speak to Becht like right after the QB draft, and it was so raw and fresh, and he's like, "Oh man," he's like, "Yeah," because I was like, "Yo, Tyler Bray is a guy we had out at the hub who was with the Chiefs and is looking to play." I was like, Tyler Bray might be a guy you want to check out. He's like, "Nah, we're good at quarterback, man. We feel great about it." And then I went back and looked after our conversation. I was like, "Oh, well, he got Ryan Willis and AJ McCarron. No wonder why he's good." I think we talked about it at the top of the show. I think Ryan Willis is going to be the best quarterback in this league. St. Louis is going to probably have the best attendance if they play games there in this league. So I like what they're doing there in terms of Anthony Becht. I had a chance to work with him at the NFLPA Bowl. He's been one of our tight end coaches for the last 4 or 5 years. Just one of the best damn coaches I've been around. So I think this Battlehawks team, like Mateo Durant, again, he was at the NFLPA Bowl but couldn't play because he was hurt. But he did the interview thing and got to meet with all the teams. And so, to me, Mateo Durant out of Duke was a borderline draftable prospect, but I think he had an ankle, and that just kind of ruined his whole draft stock. So I think they've got a great backfield. Then you inject a guy like Austin Prohl into the mix. He could do some interesting things. He's also a returner. And then I was intrigued to see Dante Dye. I mean, how many lives does this guy have? But he's had so many borderline career-ending injuries. So I think if for nothing else, that's a storyline I'm excited to see. Dante Dye, that guy was making some big plays for Tampa Bay at one point back in the day. And the tight end, Devontae Haskins out of Rutgers, I'm not surprised. He's really just a blocker, but I mean, this guy is all jacked up, 6'5", 255 pounds. My guy Marco Battaglio over there at Rutgers vouched for him, and so Devontae Haskins, he's just a big body people mover, and I like that pick. John Toth, he could play center, he could play guard, he could play tackle. I think he was a Senior Bowl guy, so that was another good pick. Mike Rose out of Iowa State, just a very smart, headsy linebacker who can make plays. I think he'll do very well as the Mike there. Shannon Stribling out of Michigan, I always felt like he played very well. I can't remember what the last team he was on, but I just know this guy was balling out. Jim Harbaugh always spoke very highly of him. So Shannon Stribling is a guy I expect with that kind of size and pedigree for him to continue doing well. And to me, he's an NFL caliber type of cornerback. I haven't been around him to know the person, but in terms of the talent, I like everything I've seen. And then Ben DeLuca, the safety out of Charlotte, was somebody that I didn't love everything I saw, but a lot of scouts that I trust and respect did. At Charlotte, I was there in person. I liked about 5 other guys better, but they kept telling me, check out Ben DeLuca, check out Ben DeLuca. I don't know. He might play. He might be a linebacker. He might be a safety. I know he plays some special teams. I just put him on my list because I think it's a guy that does have some love in the NFL scouting community. So you should at least have him on your radar.
Yeah, Stripling was a USFL guy as well. So these are some of these guys that, were signed and we're able to kind of get into that loophole here before the end of the year, which I think we'll expect to see a lot more USFL guys here once the first year contract is up. Finally, I think we did pretty good on time here. We said a little over an hour to do all these. We got Vegas Vipers. I guess out of 10 for the Battlehawks, just to pretend like we're doing that, and then we'll go.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I got to give the Battlehawks. I think they're the biggest winner. I'm going to give them a 9 because I feel like they have the best head coach. I think they have the best quarterback. I think they'll have the best home field advantage, and those are some 3 big building blocks to have a foundation of.
Also, just Anthony Becht, I think, has the best teeth of any head coach. I think he's just every time I see him, he's always just really smiling. He's really jovial. Like I think he's always doing interviews, and he's a good looking man.
You know what? That's who he is. Like that's no bullshit. Like that's truly who Coach Becht is, and that's going to go a long ways with his players. Like if you look at some of these coaches, he might be the youngest, and I think this way the game of football is trending to be a young man's game. I think Becht is probably the best guy of the bunch.
All right, finally, Vegas Vipers here. Luis Perez, the old gunslinger showing up there. Jalen McClendon on that. Final thoughts on the Vipers here as we round out our breakdowns.
Yeah, I think we did a pretty deep dive in the quarterback situation there at the top of the show. If you're just tuning in, you can go back, watch the opening segment there in terms of where and what Jalen McClendon has done and Luis Perez. I think if you're watching this show, you should be well versed on one Luis Perez. Otherwise, what are you doing here? John Lovett, I heard you guys talk about on the show out of Baylor. I think it can give a good 1-2 punch there with Matt Jones. And Jones is another guy that I really liked coming out of Florida, a big bruising running back. He was drafted relatively high by the Washington football team, somewhere in the middle rounds. I think he had a resurgence with Buffalo a couple years back. I know we had him at the Hub football camp 1 or 2 times in the last year or so. So, I mean, when you talk about a big bruising running back, I know there's a couple teams in the league that can use a running back like that. I think Matt Jones just has to go out, show, and prove that he's in shape, that he can do it on a consistent basis, and be utilized. If I recall correctly, though, he was able to catch the ball a little bit out of the backfield. So if he could show some of that and prove that he's more than just a 2-down thumper, then maybe Matt Jones finds his way back into the league. Martavis Bryant, maybe the biggest name brand player in this XFL draft. We'll see where his head is at, and if it's on right, then maybe he gets back into the league. Jeff Badett is a guy I think coming out of Oklahoma, really speedy guy that should do well on paper. The Vipers have a good team on paper, and again, I don't know if this is accurate. DeAndre Torrey, they have him listed as a wide receiver. He was just in Eagles camp as a running back, and he's only like 5'9". So I know he did have some pass catching ability. So I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. Is he converting to a slot, or is that just a typo on the sheet? We'll see. Jamil Demby out of Maine, another one of our NFLPA Bowl alumni, and he's been bouncing around the league in terms of just brute strength. You talk about throwing guys out of the club. Jamil Demby, man, this guy is just ferocious. He's tenacious. He plays through the whistle. He's going to endear himself to the Vipers fans. He's going to be one of those guys that, he'll give you a little bit of the business now after the whistle, and I like that. Robert Windsor was a guy that kind of raised my eyebrows out of Penn State because I like this young man. I think he's somewhat limited athletically, a little bit stiff-hipped, but, man, all he did was produce and make plays. He was a team captain, one of those first one in, last one out guys. Robert Windsor, who was, I believe, drafted by the Colts in maybe the 4th round or so. This is a guy, again, I don't know what the story was, why he didn't make it. If he ran into some injuries, you can only keep up with so many guys, Reed, when you're doing the NFL draft for 21 years. You have trouble keeping tabs on all these guys. But Vic Beasley is another one. A lot of Woodson and Joey Clinkscales from the Raiders, who's got a really extensive NFL background. You could see Matt Jones, Martavis Bryant, Vic Beasley. This is a team that favored veteran guys, and I think it's a nice combination. I give this a 7.5.
Yeah, no, I think your knowledge and recall is just fine. I think sometimes people it's like there's a lot of people time here. I get confused
Rolling
just
through
if
the catalog of index back there, man.
yeah. No, I get confused enough of okay, who was on the the alphas back in spring league of last year. No, we're good with that. So I think we did good. Viper 7.5. So you gave Battlehawks, you gave them a 9. You thought they were the winners. Who do you think flunked out here? The losers of the XFL draft, and
Yeah,
not the players, just the coaches.
well, I mean, I would have chosen the San Antonio Brahmas based on their quarterback draft picks, but I think they kind of salvaged that with some of the guys that you mentioned there. So, I hate to say somebody's a loser. I guess we'll just stick with the San Antonio Brahmas for now. But everybody's a winner after the draft, Reed. You know that.
No, this was good. This was exciting. I thought the USFL draft last year was really good. I thought the XFL, I would have preferred a little bit more prime time and highlighting some of the stuff. It was good and we went all day obviously it wasn't done for like casual fans, whatever, to be engaged in. But I thought that they could have done like a little bit more like the USFL did. I thought that was good. Let's highlight the first couple rounds at night, make it more of an event. Even doing the quarterback one like at 11 a.m. I thought you could have highlighted that a little bit more as well. But what do I know?
You would have hoped that with, again, the extensive background in Hollywood and TV connections, that we could have done something a little bit more extravagant. At the very least, go find two bozos like you and myself to go up there and chat about it. But they chose not to. That I'll never understand that. I think the CFL drops the ball there significantly as well. If you want to connect with your fandom, look no further than the league draft, right? Like after the Super Bowl and World Cup, the NFL draft is the most watched sporting event because people love this stuff. And to not have talking heads and knowledgeable analysts up there reacting to the picks, I thought it did the fan base injustice. And hey, we know a lot of folks over there. So if they're watching and they're tuned in, which I'm sure some of them are, hit your boy up. We're available, you know?
Well, that's the thing is, and I know next to nothing about any of this stuff, but I at least can, that's been my whole business, and I do wedding videos. Like I don't know anything about, but I can present a platform here, right? That we can do it. I'm not trying to pitch any of this stuff, but I do agree of like, having you and John Vogel and all the XFL News Sub guys on, and we had Cody Main and Eric Eager, like all these guys. Like you have so many smart college and fantasy and NFL scout, like all this kind of stuff. I just would really like to see that highlighted more. I think you can do more. I think there's a hurdle there of like, how do we make this be approachable?
Well, here's the deal. Like the players deserve it, first of all. But if we're being honest, like there's really not, like all the people that you've mentioned, I'm familiar with them. You're familiar with them. The XFL and the USFL might not be, but the fact of the matter is, like, these networks are always looking for the former player broadcaster. And let's be honest, there's not too many folks that are well versed out there that can talk about these players the way that we do and are knowledgeable about it, because I've always respected CFL scouts, none other for the fact that you've got to have a keen scouting eye, because you got to know how to identify talent. You need to learn how to identify fringe talent and why a guy might not make it, or what his downfalls might be, or why it should be a CFL guy. And I think the spring league also now will have them out at the NFLPA Bowl. They're already popping up at the Hub. I'm sure they'll be at the East-West Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl and Hula Bowl and all the other All-Star Game events as well. But, I mean, I just don't think that they had somebody in-house qualified to talk about it. And it's, I thought we did a pretty good job here making it look easy. But listen, to just rattle, I mean, I just went and looked up at the rosters and found 10 guys that I'm familiar with, and just going off the cuff here with you, but I don't know if the XFL has somebody in-house that can do what we just did here for the past hour. I'm just keeping it real.
Well, Rick, I really appreciate it. We definitely need to try to schedule you if we can get you on for the supplemental draft here when that happens in January. Your knowledge and
when is it? January what? Do we know?
Nah, I don't think they've publicly announced it yet. Sometime in January. I assume the second they can after those USFL contracts expire. Do we still have someone that wants to say goodbye before I let you go? And then I'll do it.
Your time.
And then I'm going to, I'll transition here. And
So This is my daughter, Oceana. She's my co-host over at the Football Playbook Show on Jacob Sports. If you guys want to catch more football talk each and every day, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern, right? Thank you. And we're getting over our food coma, Reed. I hope the Thanksgiving and the travel and the family and food and everything treated you guys well, and all the listening audience. Really respect the heck out of the Markcast show. Great job as always, man. And we're fans and listeners, so appreciate you.
Well, perfect. So Rick's gonna say goodbye. I'll transition here. We got Rod pre-tape, but Rod's coming up here. Rick, thank you all so much again. You guys have a good day and take care.
Rock on.
All right, guys, I appreciate that. Stick around here. Going to transition, just give a couple quick thoughts here, and then we'll go to Rod Pedersen coming up. Got back from Grey Cup. Really appreciate that. Everyone that watched all of our coverage over there. I was really surprised. I didn't really know what the CFL viewership would do this year. Last year we were coming off of all the XFL, CFL talks. Blew everything out of the water. I think we hit over 14,000 views on our Grey Cup pre-show. So I really appreciate that. And that speaks to me that as much work that we do and put into the XFL and the USFL, I think there's obviously a huge need and want for CFL content as well. And so really happy to do that. I really was on the fence. Like, are we doing Hamilton again next year? Like, what is the thought process there? And I think we're full speed ahead. Obviously really excited for Vancouver in 2024, but certainly next year looking good for Hamilton as well with all the viewership there. I'm going to toss to Rod now. Rod joined me here a little bit before Thanksgiving. So, we will transition that. I'll be here in the chat because I got to play it out live. So if you guys have any comments in the chat, I'll come back on at the end of the show, and I will announce the Doug Flutie giveaway, because I know I had promised that we were going to do that last week, and then that got lost in all the weeds with Greg Parks coming on and the pre-draft and all that stuff. We did the pre-draft episode, and then we did the quarterback thing, and we did the draft, and we were Grey Cup. So I have it over here. I'll go grab it, and we will give that away at the end. And then Robert is getting the USFL Chase Cookis jersey, so we will give that. That's given away, but we will go ahead and send that out. I have a bunch of hard drives and other things to mail for my work, so we will do that. I will try to play this video now. Hopefully this works. We'll transition to Rod. I'll be here in the chat, and we'll see you guys in a little bit. About 28 minutes with Rod reacting to Grey Cup and CFL, what's next, Randy Ambrosi, and all that stuff. Well, you were so kind to invite me on your show last Friday. It really meant a lot to me. And now I said I have to return the favor. We have Rod Pedersen here. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Reed. Thank you. Always a pleasure to come on the vaunted Markcast.
Making moves here, making moves. I think we did good on our CFL show, so I think maybe people are paying attention now. I really appreciate it. You guys had a great, showing and party, everything else going on. But I wanted to get your thoughts, talk everything, Grey Cup and the festival and all that. What was your biggest takeaway just from the week, the game, kind of anything else?
My takeaway was that when the chips are down, the CFL always delivers in the playoffs and especially the championship game. I said, Reed, the Grey Cup should have been sponsored by FedEx because the CFL always delivers. It was a great game. I was back here in Florida watching the game on ESPN, and I thought it was awesome with the snowbirds coming through. They had a camera in the snowbird cabin for the first time that I've ever seen. I thought the concerts were good. The game was great. From my perspective, it was an awesome Grey Cup. I expected it, and they delivered it.
Yeah, even, because obviously my family know that we're at the game, and like my mom's watching it, never watches CFL games. She's like, well, this is great. I mean, it really, if you're trying to get that casual audience, I do think it's you want that game to deliver if you're going to get the most views.
What did your mom say? Because I want everybody's opinion. What did she think of the whole deal?
Thought it was great. I think the last quarter makes people feel like the game itself was better throughout. I do think it was a little sleepy in the first half, but obviously that last 8 minutes or whatever it was pretty thrilling there, where it really kind of seemed like it could have went either way.
Well, you know what? It was a classic CFL game. I mean, that's the one thing and I think a lot of people watching right now, what my problems are with the CFL. It's lack of innovation in a way. It's aversion and allergy to change. But I've often said that when it comes to the game, the CFL has always gotten it right. The rules are great. The athlete's great. It comes down to the last minute usually, and that's what happened.
Do you think Chad Kelly, a good chance that he's the Argos quarterback here? I mean, I know McLeod was kind of, teasing retirement and all of that. And Chad Kelly came in and kind of made it his game there at the end.
Well, he has to be. I mean, unless they've changed the rules, which I go back to it again, they can fiddle fart around with certain things. They did have 9 rule changes last year, but to the rules that really matter, one is if you're a rookie import American, you have to sign a 2-year deal. They're not changing that, dude. And, the last guy that it really, that anybody even cared about was Johnny Manziel. He came in, and whether you think he lit it up or not, he still wanted out after his first year in the CFL. And it's like, you're not getting out. But same thing with Chad Kelly. So why, you see Rider fans, obviously I know them because I lived there for 48 years. They're like, oh, maybe we should get Chad Kelly. You can't just cherry pick from any team, or why would you expect that he wants to? Maybe he likes Toronto. He's got an interesting story there. So we'll see how the offseason plays out. But that's the other thing that was very predictable, that this guy would come off the bench and Rider fans would think that they would just pick him because they want him. It doesn't work that way.
Where that was obviously had a lot of questions, and Rob Vanstone, I know our mutual friend, was on our show talking, and I've heard Dane Evans. What do the Riders do here now in the offseason?
They clear a lot of money to sign whoever they can, because that's what it's going to take. Because if you notice, Cody Fajardo has been literally silent since he left Regina. He's not stupid. The Riders clearly showed what they think of him. Put 2 and 2 together. What do you think he thinks of the way he was treated? Yet, if Bo Levi Mitchell signs in Hamilton, and I often call it the quarterback and coach merry-go-round, or the musical chairs. You ever played musical chairs, Reed? Yeah. When the music stops? When the music stops, if these guys have nowhere else to go, they're going to take whoever's available. But Bo, it would appear, if he's not going to Hamilton, it seems like he might go to Toronto, right? And Chad Kelly's under contract. So what are the Riders going to do? They might end up having to sign Cody Fajardo. I could potentially see that happening, but it's, we're just a week past the Grey Cup. We got a long ways to go till free agency. I literally have no idea what they're going to do. But if they don't get Bo, let's put it this way, they're in a lot of trouble.
I'm curious your thoughts. The game itself, we were there, a lot of empty seats. We were talking afterward, is it that Rider fans, okay, we're protesting and we don't want to give it to Winnipeg? Is it just that there's no home team in the thing? But that's horrible, right? Because if you're rotating the Grey Cup, what did you think? I mean, to me, there was a lot of empty seats.
I have to go by just what I heard, face value from Saskatchewan people. You were there for the first time. They're real. They're genuine. You might not like what they have to say. It's very similar to me. You may not like what I have to say, but at least I'm telling you what I think and what I believe. And Rider fans bought tickets expecting the Riders to be in the Grey Cup. That's what it was. And then when they weren't, they didn't want to go because it was cold. Let's be honest. That's it. That's what I heard from everybody. There were thousands of tickets on sale at Ticketmaster via resale that people weren't snapping them up. Not all of Winnipeg is going to come to Saskatchewan to watch the game, and probably all the Argo fans that I know exist did come. That still wasn't enough to fill 33,000 seats. So Rider fans couldn't have been convinced to go, and frankly, I don't blame them. I don't think I would have gone if I was in their position, even though I'd paid for the tickets. They all tried. That's what I heard, and that's what I believe. Does that jive with you?
Yeah, but is that why Regina hasn't hosted the Grey Cup in so many years? Is it just there's not enough people there outside of the diehards that are coming in to watch? We were at brunch that morning, and our waitress, she's like, "I've never been to a Rough Rider game." I'm like, "You live?" I don't know what you do here.
It's rare. That's rare. That's incredibly rare that you would meet somebody that hasn't been to a Rider. I think I've met 2 people in my life that live in Regina and were raised and never went to a Rider game. So, they're battling the Rough Riders, a PR battle, if you will, and as are the CFL. You noticed that. If you didn't before you went to Grey Cup, you know that now leaving. And this is quite frankly one of the biggest reasons why I'm now living in Florida. I came home from the Super Bowl last year in LA, and I said, we need to make Canadian sporting events must attend. And I literally got drawn and quartered and nailed to the cross and lit on fire Nowhere did I say they need to up ticket prices. I never said that. I said we need to make our events must attend. And the national media and a lot of beat reporters just killed me. I said, you know what? I'm done. Because no matter what I say, you guys argue. Point being, the 2022 Grey Cup should have been must attend. But it wasn't. So good luck. Because where do you go from here?
I remember that. I remember all that going down. And yeah, people like even I've heard, they're trying to charge more now, but keep it smaller. Do you bring in extra seats and then charge way less? Like, I don't know what you do, but to me, the optics, even compared to we were in Hamilton last year, it just looked way less. And obviously going back to Hamilton again, I think just being in the more populated areas, but it was really alarming to me to walk in there and see so many empty seats.
Well, and back to the PR nightmare, the narrative was that you couldn't get a hotel room, but you told me you didn't have a problem. I mean, I don't live in Regina anymore. I had to get a hotel. I didn't have a problem. Where are the people that are having a problem getting hotels? Because you and I had no problem. And by the way, I paid $90 a night at a nice hotel. So again, maybe they were talking to the wrong people. Maybe you and I knew where to go. I don't know. But those are the headaches. You ask, why has Regina not had Grey Cups? They say no hotels, hard to get to. You don't fly direct from Seattle, as you found out, to get. It's not easy to get to. So it is battling. You need to really want to go if you're going to go. You really wanted to go. And I hope that you had a good time. But you're not going to go there to get a tan,
No, it was, we were really dreading it. I mean, my wife and I was like, I don't really know how this is going to go. I mean, Hamilton was one thing and, you were going through Toronto and I was really scared, but I thought everything lived up. I thought the city was great. We had lots of good food and beer. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff there. I don't like the narrative. There's no hotel rooms. What the hell are you going to do? It's hard. Like, we had a great time. I mean, and I live in Seattle. That's a pretty, populated area. You live in Florida now. I mean, that's pretty...
Very densely populated. Yeah. So, I'll say it again. I think a lot of people didn't go because they didn't think they could get hotels because the word was you can't get hotels. I had no problem and you had no problem. So again, I came off of it this way. I thought where we started this, I thought the game was great. I thought the telecast was great. You saw people complaining about the fact that the entertainment stages, the singers stages weren't on the field. They were up on the concourse. Blah, blah, blah. That's the one thing I think the CFL is battling next year if they want to sell out Hamilton. And let's not forget, it's only 24,000 seats compared to Saskatchewan, 33,000. That's a big difference. But if the narrative becomes, it's better on television than being in the stands, there's not a real hook to go. But again, that's not my battle to fight.
When I was on your show, it was just following Ambrosie and all of that. We had the big media stuff. Big takeaways from that now that you've had a chance to kind of reflect on it. I mean, we had the Ambrosie tenureship. We had the Saturday playoff games, a lot of other stuff from that. What did you strike when you had a chance to kind of reflect on it?
Well, I didn't watch the state of the address. I went by what you told me. And then what they said afterwards about moving the playoff games. And when they did it in 2008, I was a proponent of it. I thought it was a great idea to move it to Saturday. I think we discussed this. The ratings tanked. So they went right back the next year to Sunday. And I'm like, you got to give it a chance, but I can't argue why you're going back. I can't. The data's there, why you would not do this. But I think back then, Reed, that was 14 years ago, the landscape football-wise in Canada has changed a lot since then. Back then, the CFL used to clean the NFL's clock for ratings. They don't anymore. They trail the NFL for ratings on Sundays. So this is a very good time to do it. I applaud that. As far as all the other things, the Genius Sports, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Did the expansion talk even come up? Halifax and that?
I mean, there was always one of the questions. Ambrosie talked about the 10th team, and I see a lot of people now saying like it's more like cry wolf now. It's not when we get a 10th team, it's if we get a 10th team. I mean, it really feels like it's continuing to drag out.
Well, yeah. And to be honest, that's kind of when I got finished with anything Randy Ambrosie says. I think they killed it with this Touchdown Atlantic when they announced it last spring that Toronto was going to play Saskatchewan and Halifax, and the media came away from that news conference going, we're really close. We're really close now. And I think Ambrosie said, we're closer than we've ever been to having a 10th team. And then the weekend comes and the guy that I know well, that's the money man behind the Schooners, goes, I'm not even going to the game because we're not even talking. And I don't want to give people the wrong impression. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. Why would you believe anything after that?
Yeah, I just don't get how that can be just so disconnected, those messaging where, you're saying this and you're coming out like, and that's the one thing he's asked about all the time. I mean, everything I see him on, that is the number one question. And it just seems like if you have no plan at all, but you're talking about it, I never understand that.
I hope you're not asking me for the answer because I don't have it. I have no idea. So, the commissioner's job is to focus on the good, not the bad. And that's not a surprise. There's a lot of good things that the CFL has going for it. I mean, you can look at the BC Lions and what's going on there. Everybody feels that the Edmonton Elks are going to be good at some point under Chris Jones. They had to start somewhere. So those markets, which are important markets, every market in the CFL is important. But let me ask you this. If it's your show, and I don't want to take a hairpin turn here, but somebody wrote in to our blog, rodpeterson.com this week, and said, how ironic is it that the one team that wants to leave the CFL, the Toronto Argonauts, win it? It is a little ironic, isn't it?
Well, I saw a lot of, no one in Toronto cares. And I saw a lot of reporters arguing with fans. And it's like, well, you keep spelling this, spouting, hey, nobody cares. And then nobody cares. And you're focused on that. I don't know. I don't see a lot of Toronto people going crazy. I know Enoch Mwamba was at the hockey game. I mean, I saw it. I think it's good, but I don't know what that parade looks like. I think it was today or tomorrow as we record this, right? Right. They do a victory parade.
They're doing, I got the email from the Argos. They're honoring the team at, I can't remember. I'm not a Toronto guy, but it's a place downtown right across from Sport Check and the Cactus Club, if I'm correct. One something square. So it's not I don't think it's a parade per se, but they're going to have a little rally there, which I think is awesome and they deserve. I've never spent one day living in Toronto as a Torontonian, so I don't pretend to get inside their head and what it's going to take for them to support the Argos. What I do remember, long before you, Reed, were probably even thought of, was the 1991 Argos winning the Grey Cup when the team, you've heard about it a million times, obviously, when the team was owned by John Candy, Wayne Gretzky, and Bruce McNall. They were packing Skydome every game, 55,000. They won the Grey Cup. It was Narnia. And what's happened since, I don't understand it, but I think anybody that's grown up in Toronto remembers that. So they had a good crowd for the East Final. I don't think the Toronto Argonauts' heartbeat is dead in that town, but I don't know. I'm not from there.
It is. I agree with you, though. It is a bad look where there's been so much anti-MLSE and anti-Argos and all this kind of stuff. And then, I see it's not even on the website. They haven't even posted it on the thing. What the hell is going on? I saw Bob Irving going crazy about it. So it's a mix there where if any of the other, 8 teams won it, they'd be doing backflips. And it is the one that's kind of I don't know if they're the heel of the CFL, but it kind of feels that way sometimes.
I don't know what it is. I mean, as each year goes by that I'm not working in the league full time, I drift further away from what's going on. But I mean, here I addressed a high school football team here the other day on, their part of life, the recovery world, mental strength and stuff. And one of the coaches came up to me and was talking about what Bob Irving had tweeted and how bad it is on the Argos. I'm like, well, that's not very positive. The Hall of Famer Bob Irving taking a swipe at the Grey Cup champions, and they're talking about it down here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That's not good. But on the other hand, was Bob wrong? Right? I didn't see their website, but if he's saying that they didn't update it for the fact that they won the league, that's not good. Pee-wee hockey teams are more with it than that. Now, the first thing I thought was they're too busy partying. I was the voice of the team for 20 years, that won 2 championships. The next day is a blur. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's somebody's job, but it just kind of goes back to what McLeod Bethel Thompson said. I'll take that with me well into the off season, what he said on the Wednesday or Thursday at Grey Cup, where the narrative and the problems and the negative tone of the CFL starts at the top and it's a crab bucket. And we don't celebrate ourselves, which we really should. But here's somebody taking a strip off the Grey Cup champions because they hadn't updated their website. Not that positive.
But I think, I get into that too with the XFL because I am, I'm I'm Mr. Negative, whatever. But I don't think anything is improved by sitting around and saying this is fine. I mean, I think you need to. I think you can celebrate, right, and the game and everything else and the festival, but there's always room to improve, especially with the CFL. Like I think having people like Bob or you or these people that have followed and been a part of the league for so long, I think you have to have that, or else nothing ever changes, right?
You'd think. But, I have people in the league, people that were in the league far longer than me. When I point out those types of things, Rod hates the CFL. Rod's anti-CFL. Rod's a CFL hater. And I'm like, that's why I've just kind of stopped giving my commentary. I went to Grey Cup week. I celebrated it, but I'm not going to point out their mistakes. I told you how much I love the 109th Grey Cup. Like, they don't want it. Who likes having their mistakes pointed out? Not too many people, so, and by the way, as I said on my show with you, I'm so grateful that during that 2020 season being wiped out, you and I met. I just really thought that the XFL partnership was going to happen. And I guess maybe deep down, I'm upset at Randy Ambrosie for duping us. That the week of the regular season, he just pulled the rug out from everybody and said, nope, we're not talking anymore.
Well, I told you, I think it was a duping on both sides. I mean, I feel like that really was used to buy time for the XFL side as well. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they came into that as, hey, let's like play it. But definitely both sides benefited from, let's have a lot of people talk about us for 3.5 months. And then, sorry. Ambrosie was on, was it Donnie and Dolly? Remember, like, oh yeah, we talked about the Downs thing for 5 minutes and then moved on. I'm like, I got a lot of YouTube content out of that 5 minutes of talking you guys did.
Well, yeah, no kidding. Well, I guess the point is, all I'm saying is it got me so fired up about partnering with American interests that I said, if you're not going to do it, I'll do it. So here we are in Florida, and I'm doing outreach in the community here on behalf of our show and our brand. And we're now on the air in Atlanta. We're growing in America. And guess what? It's awesome. And I just really get the sense that the CFL doesn't want to do that. Like, I've had some of your XFL guys write me and say, why do you think The Rock was meeting with Larry Tannenbaum when he was in Toronto? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't even know. The only reason I reported that, which I think I told you, you either texted or DM'd me, was two very influential football people told me the meeting was happening. They're like, put it out. And that's all they said. I wasn't trying to stir anything. You notice nobody denied it, Reed. Nobody denied it. But why they were doing it, I have no idea.
No, I was a little cranky that day. I was like, I think Rod just woke up and chose violence this day. Like, let's just.
I never choose violence, but I'm like, when these guys, whom I trust, give me a tidbit like that, what am I supposed to do with it? Here's what I realized long ago in this media game: when somebody calls you up and gives you info, they're not doing it because they're your friend. They're doing it because they want you to put it out. So I did, and I don't know what it means.
Well, I think a lot is to be said, like you said, for you guys going into the States, expanding. We have, really good. I had really no idea what the second year of the CFL would look like because, last year we were writing off all the XFL stuff. And here, we did better views and, kind of blew all my expectations out of the water. So I think it says to just having outside opinions and thinking outside, and whether you're, moving up or down. I think that it all benefits from that. And it's frustrating to me sometimes where I do feel like sometimes I just, hey, we don't want your opinion because it's like, well, yeah, but I feel like I might know something here or have maybe just an outside thought that maybe not be all total bollocks,
Yeah, but what time of the world and society are we living in that we can't host a show like this and just give our thoughts? Like when you celebrated alternative football media. Remember when you said that a couple months ago? And I was like, is that what we are? That sounds weird, but it probably is what we are. You know what I mean? XFL, USFL, CFL, it's anything not NFL. And for you to say that people got upset about that didn't really surprise me either.
What's next here for the CFL? Coming out last year, it feels like we've rebounded a little bit. The games were good, everything. Ambrosie says he's sticking around. What do you see? Any big stuff here? Or are we just back to par's course and we're just moving forward?
Well, let's put it this way. What's disappointing to me, I'll follow the sources. I've got a lot of football sources here in Florida that are giving me interesting it's going to be business as usual, is my point. There's a lot of teams that have camps, open free agent tryout camps here in Florida that I'll be attending right in this area. I think the Elks have one, the Rough Riders have one, the Alouettes have one. So I'll head down and see my game. It's business as usual. I think the really disappointing thing for me, if you sit back, like what was your first year, Reed, of really following the CFL in terms of checking the standings week to week and knowing who the players were?
Last year, after all the XFL stuff.
Okay, so before that, you don't even know what the CFL really was pre-COVID. What was disappointing to me was when they came back after the canceled season, nothing changed. Other than the Eskimos were renamed the Elks. But other than that, nothing changed. It was all the same personalities whom I love in a lot of ways, but I would have liked to have seen a betting component. You had a full year to work on having an app, having all these digital assets at your fingertips that you promised we were going to get. None of that happened. So my answer to your question is coming back. I don't think too much is going to change at all. I mean, from what I understand, money is an issue. It's always an issue. I understand it's an issue with the XFL, and you're following that far more closely than I am. Like, does Las Vegas have a place to play yet?
No.
Does it?
Not yet.
No. So that's a problem. So unfortunately, I would love to be the guy, and as I think you would too, to be able to go on the air and talk about a league that's flourishing and growing and everything's great, similar to, the NFL media does that. But we're going to be talking about a lot of problems and financial problems. If we want to do that, the other thing is free agency and whatever players are available out there. We're going to be following that a bit, but I'm not following it as much as I used to. It used to be my everything, and now it's just not.
It wasn't. I think I mentioned it when I was on. Interesting, just the people that weren't there this year covering it that were there last year. And I don't know if that's a CFL issue, if that's a print media issue, kind of what the problem is with that. But it is alarming as someone. My first news station ever, I walked in, and 3 weeks after I was there, they laid off half the newsroom. So I'm very aware of like this downsizing since I've ever been. And now I'm obviously, do wedding videos, but always aware of that. It's just alarming to me. And I think that's something we need to keep an eye on. When Toronto isn't sending people, when Calgary isn't sending people that, like the Danny Austins of the world that you would just expect to be there and they aren't there. That is alarming to me from a bigger picture.
Well, we could listen. I'm 49. I started covering the CFL in 1991. So do the math. 31 years. I was 18. And I'm talking about on sideline reporter on Rough Riders Radio. I was not only with at the Grey Cups in Regina, but I've been to 21 Grey Cups. And dude, those Grey Cups were bursting at the seam. Everything, all the news conferences, all the party rooms, the stadium, everything was bursting. And now it's a trickle. And, there's going to be a lot of people blaming COVID for that. I'm with you on the media cuts. That's hurt the CFL more than anything. That's not the team's fault, but it's still a thing. And that's where Bob's right. I mean, I joke. Bob Irving. I love him. But the teams, if you're not being covered in the Toronto Sun or on TSN, you might want to update your own website. So a lot of the CFL's problems are of their own making.
I just remember that I was on a Zoom call with a lot of the reporters after the Grey Cup last year, like that FRC, whatever thing. And they were lamenting the Zoom calls and like, we don't want to have Zoom interviews anymore because we want everybody in person and you should be on, because you have boots on the ground, you should get these benefits. I'm like, yeah, but then this year, like nobody was there. I mean, it's just interesting. Like you can't, maybe you guys could also benefit from that and not complaining that people aren't showing up at the practices if your station isn't sending you. I mean, there's something to be said for that as well here looking in the future. I was alarmed with that. It scared me.
Well, yeah, but that's a reality for me that I've known of for the last few years, right? I mean, I was one of the first guys to get whacked long before COVID, but now I got longtime media guys calling me scared. They either think it's coming or it has come, and they're like, how do we do what you do? I'm like, not that easy. Takes a lot of balls, to be honest with you. But that's where we are in this media landscape. And I go back to this. I mean, we could sit here, and I'm going to have to run here right away, but we could go back to, I saw the thing the other day, CFL News was tweeting, the account on Twitter, that Gary Stern, the Alouettes owner, had said, the U.S. market is a really untapped market for the CFL. I'm like, that's just dawning on you. Okay. And now what are you going to do about it, Gary? Because I talked about it on our show today. You need to be setting up a pop-up, a tent at every state fair, county fair, going to Super Bowl, having a venue there, interactive, but they're not doing any of that. None of it, right? What are you doing to grow within Canada, let alone the United States? That's the thing. They sit around and talk about this stuff forever and nothing ever happens. And it's very frustrating to me because I've seen the way they used to do it. And it's not the same people running the show now. You know?
But then, yeah, and I'll let you go here. I appreciate your time. Thanksgiving week here. Very gracious. Yeah, I mean, the XFL isn't even doing that in the markets that they're playing in 3 months. So, I mean, if we're going to criticize the CFL, that. But anyway, Rod, I really appreciate it. Like I said, it meant a lot to have, let me come on and in person and meet you and Darren and everyone else. So I really appreciate it. Anything else before I let you go?
You're awesome guy, Rita. I appreciate you. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Thanks for having me on this special episode. And if you need me throughout the winter, you know where to find me.
Awesome. Thanks again. Well, there we go. I think I got that all figured out. That was pretty tricky there, huh? There, Reed pops back in. Thank you guys all so much. Little different today, just coming back into town. I appreciate Rick being able to come on, trying to record stuff during Thanksgiving, probably easier for my family life not to be recording stuff all day on Thanksgiving. So I appreciate that. Appreciate Rick's, hour plus today, day after Thanksgiving, doing all that. And then obviously Rod, and for having me come on the show as well. That was really cool to see Rod in person and do all that back. If you missed, it was the Friday before Grey Cup. So that would have been the 18th, his episode there on the channel. Really appreciate that. Jenna thought it was cool. Anything else before we go? Thought we did decent today. Didn't know what the viewership would be. And hopefully this episode lives a little bit now because we've got the XFL roster deep dives, Grey Cup Reax and all that stuff, still timely, but a little bit more timeless there. I think this roster stuff will be interesting here for the next few weeks, and then we'll get ready for the supplemental draft here in January. I hope you guys all had a great American Thanksgiving. I always get that every year. We had no Canadian Thanksgiving was back on October 10th, but really appreciate that. Before we go, this is long overdue. We are giving away the Doug Flutie BC Lions jersey. If you are wanting to get this, I had a call for reviews. This has taken like a month. We had to try to give away the one, and then it wasn't claimed. And then we gave away Robert got the Case Cook's jersey. So we really appreciate that. I had a lot of people submit reviews for this, wanting to get the Doug Flutie. This is the Royal Retros custom Doug Flutie BC Lions jersey, brand new. Texas Pete, you are going home the winner if you claim it. Now, this is the thing. You got to make it to the end of the episode to find out. But Texas Pete, you are the winner of the Doug Flutie. Robert, we'll get your Case Cook's one out. Guys, we are so rapidly approaching 2,500 subscribers. We added on, I think, 110, 120 something with all the CFL Grey Cup stuff. So appreciate that. If you guys like all the content we are doing, like and subscribe. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Very excited. We'll be watching the Apple Cup tomorrow, University of Washington with my wife. And then the Commanders, a big game Sunday. Who would have thought? 6-5 here hosting the Falcons at home. Really appreciate that. Thank you guys all so much again. I think that's it today. I think we did all the comments. MRP says, happy Thanksgiving. Yes. And if you did not check out our Grey Cup show, 14,000 views. Insane. 14,000 views, double the CFL's own channel in terms of viewers for the Grey Cup or pre-show. Really appreciate everyone. Farhan Naylor, Pinball was on that. We had Daryl Davis, we had Darren Bombing, everybody that came up on that, Daniela and Adam and Rob Vanstone and Dan Ralph and Jim Mullen. I think that was it. But 14,000 views. That tells me that people care and are passionate about the CFL. They are passionate about the different platforms that people can provide. I'm very proud of the platform that we provide here. So thank you guys all so much for checking it out. Hope you have a good Friday. I'm going to play the outro here, and I think we should be good. Good show next week. Don't know what the heck we're doing, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. Going to start reaching out to some guests on Monday, but we'll figure it out. We always do, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much.